Methallylescaline, 65 mg, orally. I had only one prior experience with this compound, and it happened about 2 months prior to this experience. I've had experience with 2CT2, 2CE, 2CI, 2CB, 25B, C, I, Genebohm, DOM, allylescaline, and proscaline, which are most relevant to this experience as they are mescaline analogs. However, there's a lot in common with MDMA, MDA, and LSD's effects, which will also be noted frequently. The plan for the evening was to go to a concert with my girlfriend, and see our favorite band. I knew it would take a good 30 to 45 minutes before I started feeling anything, and the concert venue was only about 10 minutes from my house, which gave me plenty of time to dose and get to the show, but not necessarily in that order. At approximately 1845, T+0:00, I ingest 65 mg of methallylescaline in a gel capsule, and proceed to play the waiting game. For the next 15 minutes, I smoke cannabis to help with any nausea coming on, as well as ease my anxiety a bit. T+1:00, not much felt. A mild haze begins to come across my field of vision. Contrasts begin to deepen around this point, but still only feels like maybe A+. I can tell something is there, but I don't know what it's going to do. During this time, my girlfriend and I are standing around on the dance floor, waiting for the bands to play. It'd be probably another 30 minutes to an hour before they played. Mentally, things begin feeling a little cloudy. Plus. T+1:05, 1950, a sudden shift in energy and focus, as visuals suddenly intensify. Colors become more enhanced, objects have a refined sheen to them, lines appear more crisp. I'm pretty sure the beer I drank played a heavy role in the sudden shift, as I've noticed this sort of effect on 2CB, where drinking alcohol helps bring it out faster. Nausea also picks up considerably. T+1:25, the wood patterns in the floor begin to contrast, and a mild melting motion was noticed, reminding me of how the wood on a door melted when I tried 2CE for the first time. My tactile senses feel enhanced around this point, too. My hand running through my hair was probably the first sensation I felt, but there was a general warmth and softness near my groin, akin to 2CB for me as well, lending a somewhat aphrodisiac component to this. What's odd is how mildly sedating this was. It's not a get-up-and-dance party drug. Sure, it was a phenethylamine at its core, but it is very stoning, more on that later. My right nostril suddenly becomes congested, making it harder for me to breathe, combined with tactile enhancement. It's weird when I am not breathing in as much as quickly as I want to. Music becomes moderately enhanced around this point as well, but it's still only the pre-band track list they play at shows. Plus. T+1:33, I notice the temperature of the AC vent above me blowing over me as I recline on the side of the dance floor against a stool in the wall. It makes sense to me, the placement of this vent. When you get too hot on the dance floor and need to step to the side to cool off, you can come here and the vents will help you. It was an interesting though tangent, and I wondered about how well ventilated their dance floor really is. Nausea really begins to take hold at this point, and is very heavily influenced by quick motions. Tracers of people walking by become prominent, nearly completing the fully array of visual phenomena. My sense of hearing is also heightened somewhat, where I can hear noises from further distances, but not in clear detail. It just felt like it was sharpened. T+1:50, the nausea becomes a bit too much for me to handle. So I'd venture onwards out of the venue, back to my car, to smoke a couple pinch hitters of cannabis, hoping that the weed would help the nausea settle down. During this walk, I became entranced with the ground, where it had a very lustrous iridescent glittering sheen. The street lights reflecting off the sidewalk created a visual effect I had only ever previously seen, and noticed, on LSD before, which is what I refer to as rainbow stars. Rainbow stars, for me, is where stars and lights that glimmer/twinkled will start to phase and shift through colors, and while I first noticed it exclusively lysergamides, LSD 25, 1P-LSD, allylad, it seems methallylescaline has crossed that gap. When I get into my car, I proceed to smoke, and my nausea starts to diminish after a couple hits, but I opt to go for one more batty to be safe and thorough. When I step out of the car after this session, the rainbow stars effect amplified beyond what I'm used to seeing LSD do. Simply put, methallylescaline was more visual to me than LSD had been. On top of the rainbow stars, there was also additionally patterning akin to that I've seen on 2CE and 2CT2, with a sort of sinusoidal interwoven latticework pattern, geometric in structure and repetition, but organic and somewhat rounded in nature. At this point, I have a very broad spectra of visual phenomena, strong color enhancement leaning towards neon overtones, rainbow stars, tracers, pattern enhancement, deepened contrasts, shiny textures on objects, some drifting, not as much as I had experienced on 2CE, visual acuity, and some kind of buzzing. This set of phenomena was consistent throughout the experience from this point until the end of the peak. The body load became more significant around this point, which I suppose is the tax for the higher end dose of methallylescaline. I would describe it as very stoning, akin to some indica weed in its couch lock. It felt almost as though there were small stones tied to my limbs, slowing down my body movements. It wasn't very enjoyable to dance. This also might be due to having been standing all day prior. I felt achy. Sure, I liked the music, but I just couldn't force myself to dance. I thought briefly about how nice it would be to have some MDMA to give it some more energy. It had a weird body buzz where my legs would feel almost as though someone had strings attached to my nerve endings, and they were jerking on them, making my legs want to spasm and twitch, similar to Dom in that sense. Having all that energy, and not wanting to do anything to spend it, but knowing it's really there all along, and it'll keep you going, but you don't want to go anywhere, is one way I'd characterize my experience with this juxtaposition of body energy, but no mental or physical energy. But there was also some temperature sensitivity, much like PiHKAL, or some of the 2C series, making me acutely aware of how easily I can overheat. My body does not want to hold water in. I have to pee, though not nearly half as bad as PiHKAL. I constantly sweat. Because of this effect alone, I'd say excessive alcohol intake because alcohol saps water from the body, and coupled with the body already wanting to shed itself of water. Seriously. No more than 2 beers, and no hard liquor, and this includes any beer consumed during the onset. Plus. T+3:00. Most objects and lights have some kind of rainbow after image about them. The bright LED lights on the band illuminate these neon outlines of each band member. As the visual stimuli began to become too intense, I close my eyes briefly and discover an interesting land of mental imagery. There were some complex, rounded geometric shapes, made of lines, akin to a 3D line graph outlining a particular shape via XYZ parametric equations. Not fully developed in color, or at least, not as far as I could tell when I observed them. Maybe I didn't focus hard enough on them? I begin to feel more enveloped by the sound of the music, and the energy of the crowd. It could also be for me chugging a Red Bull, and having a Diet Coke plus vodka. Remember when I mentioned earlier how one should avoid hard alcohol? This is when I learned that lesson. As soon as the alcohol began to settle, I kept burping, and dry retching, almost coming close a few times. I thought it was funny how that noise alone will clear out a dance floor in front of you, almost instantly. I eventually make my way to the restroom to properly purge, as I've heard is sometimes necessary. 2CE certainly had this element. Once I purged, I felt better, and didn't really feel nearly as nauseous. I could move more freely now that I wasn't worried as much about motion-induced nausea. The caffeine I had earlier must be kicking in, too. T+5:00. The glass of ice water in my hand is almost a necessity to staying cool. Specifically, my left palm as it was closer to my heart, and thus more direct in its cooling action to my CNS. Essentially, I used a glass of ice as a heat exchanger radiator for my body, and it worked surprisingly well. I didn't feel too hot. It didn't feel too cold. But then I spilled my drink, which ruined that whole idea. I kept dancing from this point until about T+5:30, when the show finally ended, without my coolant system, and without properly rehydrating. Part of this was due to the bar being horribly understaffed and slow, so getting anything from there took a while. T+7:00, laying in bed, trying to sleep, but knowing I can't. I toss and turn endlessly, wishing to sleep, but realizing it'd be pointless to even try. I end up meditating for the next few hours, in a land where hours go by in minutes, but each moment feels like an eternity. I may have even drifted in and out of sleep briefly, but that didn't really matter because at 4:45 a.m., approx T+10:00, I heard what sounded like knocking on my door. At first I thought nothing of it, turned over, and tried to ignore it. Then it happened again, this time, a bit louder. I wait for my roommates to reply, stir, or something, but there's not a peep to be heard from them. Finally, after them banging on our door, and I mean, it was shaking the house and the floors, I peek through, and I see 2 people on our front door. They try analyzing who I am, thinking at first that I might be my roommate. They then notice that I am not. One, directly in front of the door, had long hair, and a Baja hoodie. There was also a girl, who looked possibly a year younger than him or so, standing off to his side. I opened the door, and asked them why they're pounding on the door like that. They asked to see my roommate because they desperately need to talk to him. It almost seemed as though the news they had to deliver was dire and personal, or that they maybe owed him money. I have no clue. It just seemed so odd to be so urgent. I was scared shitless, because I didn't know if it was the cops at the door or what. That sort loud knocking usually means that someone has some serious business with you. It's not a 4:45 knock on the door. I try to get my roommate to get down there to talk to him, but he's passed out cold. I tell them I wish them the best of luck, and that my roommate isn't budging at all. I go upstairs and back to bed. Then about 20 minutes later, the loud knocking continues. With even more force, so much my girlfriend thought they might break the glass. It was the kind of behavior that is about what I'd expect from a stereotypical tweaker. And no fucking courtesy whatsoever. I mentioned that when they knock that hard, it scares me because I think it's the cops or something bad. They said they understood, and that they were sorry. But I'm still sore about it. My headache from dehydration was steadily getting worse. I felt hungover as fuck. I have no doubt in my mind that alcohol primarily contributed to this. The whole incident was wrong. T+12:15, after the incident, there was no sleeping for me. More of the trance-like state of ego loss. I don't remember much until after my girlfriend left in the morning to see her sister. I refrained from my usual dose of amphetamine until after I had properly hydrated myself. I went to a gas station, bought a thing of coconut water, and sipped on it gradually, then took my usual medications, Vyvanse and Bupropion SR, knowing if I took them immediately, it could stress my body's dehydration further. I followed that coconut water with a monster rehab, and felt much better. No longer dehydrated. Not sure if I am still feeling any residual effects, or if most of it has worn off. T+14 to 16 hours? 95% sure I am at baseline plus sleep deprivation. Extensions and commentary, plus discussion of health risks. This one is certainly not to be used as one would typical psychedelics, even though it has many similarities to LSD and MDMA. A better setting for this would be around a campfire, with stars above me, or in some general setting where I know I'm not going to want to move around a lot, but I can allow myself to twitch comfortably. Very social in nature, and probably the most visually pleasing compounds I've ever come across, but it is not to be used like MDMA, LSD, ketamine, cocaine, or weed. Those are party drugs, this is a more serious one. The main problem is the tax associated with taking the right amount to get insane visuals. I remember some report going above 60 mg to be somewhat uncomfortable, and going above 75 mg to be excessive, and that the visuals get much more intense around 60 mg. The last time I tried it, I had 50 mg, and felt like my field of visual glowed a bit in interesting ways, and then when I combined it with LSD, it really began showing its flavors. The body load with that was present, but manageable. With 65 mg, the issues related to body load are more prominent. It is important to know how to keep yourself cool on this compound, as it can be easy to overheat on. A bottle or glass of ice water will be really helpful to have on hand. Avoid prolonged or strenuous physical activity. It's probably why this one didn't become more popular, because the body load is on the stronger end of phenethylamines, and it lasts quite a while. Much longer than what most people want or are used to. Some things I love most about it. Aphrodisiac potential. This had the same warm groin feeling that 2CB had, and I found myself thinking about sex quite frequently. When sex was attempted, I could not orgasm, but had plenty of energy. Many MDMA-like components to it, music and bass were very similar to how MDMA affects music perception, but it had a psychedelic penetrating quality to it, akin to LSD or 2CB. Very sociable, and with many empathetic notes, though slightly less than MDMA. Highly analytical in many regards, and I feel would have some potential for therapy, but it'd also likely be a more uncomfortable experience than MDMA. It also increased my cravings for nicotine. One of the most prominent similarities it had with MDMA and NDA is what it does for textures, in the sense that things felt very soft, very fuzzy, very pleasant to touch. This tactile enhancement was on par with MDA and MDMA's, which surprised me, but I hypothesize is a feature of the oxygens attached to the 3 and 4 positions on the carbon ring. In many ways, more visual than LSD, colors had a sort of intense neon iridescence, sparkles were captivating, etc. There were a few instances where the sensory overload from the visual stimuli meant that I felt the compulsive need to close my eyes. It is closest visually to 2CB in color intensity and vibrance, 2CT2 in patterning, 2CE in closed-eye imagery and fantasy, and LSD in its rainbow accents, glimmer/shimmer, and color shifts. The mindset, it makes me feel almost like a tribal hunter, which I first felt on 2CI. The ability to hear things further away than I would normally, how my vision in the dark is enhanced, the seemingly endless energy to move about if I muster up the will, the aphrodisiac component I can imagine mescaline has as well. It filled me with an almost primal, animalistic desire to have sex in a ferocious, raw manner. I could imagine Native Americans would use peyote to aid with sex and make it more pleasurable to help with survival in the harsh desert environment. They might have even used it to keep warm in the cold desert nights. The random waves of hunger were also much like an effect I've experienced on 2CI. I felt a great appreciation for methallylescaline, and compounds like it, mescaline, and their place in humanity's story. Overall, I'd say the only drawbacks are its body load and long duration. In my opinion, its visual, tactile, and auditory stimuli are more than enough to make up for its unpleasant side effects. Good for a music festival, or whenever weather is a bit colder. And again, avoid alcohol, or taking it in the summer, and certainly both.